Hello. It's going to be a somewhat short video, but I just want to bring this is something that all you outside of the trucking industry need to know about. There's this term floating around for people that will be operating self-driving semi-trucks. 80,000-pound trucks being controlled by a computer. The term that's being used for the operators is safety driver. There's a number of issues with that term. First, you as the general public are being completely lied to about autonomous trucks. Now, granted, I'm full disclosure, I'm in a truck, obviously, so I got skin in the game. But all that aside, if the trucks were really safe, if they were actually capable of being safe, I wouldn't mind being behind the wheel of a truck driving itself. That would just make my job so much easier. That's not the reality, though. The trucks are not safer, and they cannot be safer. And the issue comes down to multiple things. First, just think about your smartphone, your home computer, your tablet. They run on a network. How often does your network crash? Yeah. Enough said about that, because the trucks will be running on that same network. The trucks also would be running on a CPU. How often does your computer just crash or get a virus? Every time a new program is downloaded. How often do you have to go through issues? Like with Windows, used to be a major issue. I gotta admit, the new Windows 10 isn't as bad, but like XP, every time I updated my XP, I had to wait sometimes months for the XP to run right before they got all the bugs worked out of the XP. And it comes down to the issue of the technology advancing so fast that the hardware in the computer, everything had to be reworked to match up with some of the other hardware. So when you have a truck that's even only 6 or 7 years old, its technology is already out of date, which is going to cause major issues for this truck driving itself 80,000 pounds down the road through places where your children are getting on school buses, or your mom is driving to the grocery store, or dad and mom and dad are driving to work, or your kids are going to their first job. There are so many issues just on the technological side of it. Now, that aside, let's say we get over all them hurdles. These trucks operate on air brakes. Air brakes are not like the brakes in your car. When you hit the brake in your car, the only time in between the brakes starting to engage, I mean, there's a millisecond there, but it's not noticeable. But the only real time between the brake being engaged on your car is the time it takes for your foot to move from the accelerator to the brake pedal. In a truck, you have the time it takes to move from the accelerator to the brake pedal, the brake being depressed, the air actually flowing through the system, and then the brakes finally being engaged. Altogether, that could take up to 3/4 of a second compared to a millisecond in your car. In your car, you're looking at like 1/8 of a second from all that. That's about how long it takes to move your foot. It's 1/8 of a second. So you're looking at realistically 1/8 of a second. 3/4 of a second in a truck. On top of that comes the issue of when you're actually driving. Not talking about driving a car, because we all know while you're driving your car, you're playing with your phone, you're doing everything you're not supposed to be doing. And that's a whole nother issue. So we're not going to talk about the people in their cars. But when you're driving a truck, you're constantly paying attention to what's going on around you generally. 90% of the truck drivers. It's a complete opposite of what goes on in the car. Only 10% of your car drivers actually drive a car the way truck drivers, 90% of truck drivers drive their truck. That's a statistic that is well documented, well known, and plenty of studies prove it, so I'm not even going to argue it. But if the truck is driving itself, then the driver isn't doing anything. Yeah, they're looking around. I'd be looking around. I'd be taking in my scenery, be paying attention to traffic in front of me, but I'd also be taking in my scenery. And here comes the issue. Something happens in front of me, and the truck fails to operate and react properly. Let's say that takes 1 second for me to realize that the truck isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing, and now I gotta react to what the truck is not properly reacting to. That will take a minimum of the 3/4 second for the brakes to engage, plus the time it takes for me to react. All said and done, you're looking at upwards of 3 seconds. Now, instead of that, what would have been 3/4 of a second with me operating the truck, now will be up to 3 seconds for me to take over the truck and do what the truck is not properly doing. At 60 miles an hour, out here in the Midwest where I drive mostly, it's 80 miles an hour. And you can't have trucks doing 55 on an 80 mile an hour highway. That's not safe. That's actually a danger to you and your family if we're only doing 55. That's, when I went to school, I learned that in 3rd grade about the flow of traffic and why traffic is all supposed to be doing the same speed limit. So these states with these split speed limits, and they say it's about safety, has nothing to do with all about safety, and the science proves it, because most accidents that happen in split speed limits actually happen from somebody rear-ending the truck, because the truck is going so much slower than the car to begin with. It's a proven fact, and it's something they've been aware of since the 40s. I learned this in 3rd grade elementary school. So the idea that these politicians don't know this, well, I'm not going to talk about the modern education system. I was fortunate enough to go to school when we were still actually educated. But that doesn't solve the problem. Like I said, that does nothing but put you, your family, your children, and everyone else around you in danger on the highway. Split speed limits are the most dangerous obstacle on. That might be the only thing more dangerous than 90% of people in their cars playing with their phone like this here. Just demonstrating how I see drivers in their cars all the time. I sit above the cars. I see that all the time. That is so extremely common. So that it's a close second, if not exceeding the dangers created by smartphones and people behind the wheel. So the split speed limit isn't the answer. And the autonomous trucks, like I said, it's just that reaction time alone. 3 seconds. In 3 seconds, your whole family can be wiped out. Because it takes 10 seconds to get this thing down from 60 to 70 miles an hour down to a complete stop. And that depends on the load on the truck too. Fully loaded at 80, at 79, 80,000 pounds, the truck will actually stop faster. If I'm hauling a load of toilet paper, it will actually take me almost twice as long to stop the truck. And the reason why is because there's no weight on the trailer, so the trailer brakes are just like in a car. When you slam on your brakes and the car actually takes longer to stop because it's skidding, that's what happens with the truck with a light load. The less weight on the trailer, the longer it takes to stop the truck. And if the roads are wet, it takes even longer yet. I mean, on a wet road, fully loaded, it will take me about 15 seconds to get this truck to a complete stop. With a light load, you're looking at well over 30 seconds because the truck keeps sliding. My ex-wife got in the truck with me one single time. We were coming back from Jacksonville. We were on US 17, and I saw the light turn red well ahead of me. I mean, we're talking 400 or 500 yards ahead of me. Every time I touched the brakes, it was raining. Every time I touched the brakes, the truck was sliding. I didn't even get the truck to a stop when the light turned green. Every single time I touched the brakes, the truck slid. Florida is kind of unique because, it gets so hot there that all the oil bubbles up in the out of the asphalt, and then when it rains, it makes the roads super slick like a sheet of ice. So Florida is kind of it happens in cars too. It happens all the time in cars. I've actually had it happen to me in my little tiny sports car Integra, and I've also had it happen in the big heavy 97 Crown Vic. So, it doesn't matter how heavy your car is or how light your car is. It happens all the time in Florida. And with the truck, it's even worse because the trucks are designed to stop loaded. The brakes react at their optimal performance with the most weight on the truck. So the less weight you got on the truck, the less optimal performance you're going to get out of the brakes. And the less optimal your braking distance. So there's all kinds of issues that come up with that. And the self-driving trucks, they're not going to be safer. It's just unrealistic to think that they're going to be safer. There's no way. I mean, even if I'm paying attention, still paying attention, I'm going to be more relaxed just sitting there letting the truck drive, and my guard's going to be down no matter what. It's human nature. This is why in security work, when you're talking about high profile security and super high security measure, security guards tend to only work 4-hour shifts, or they tend to work 4 hours, then they have an hour off, then they go back and work 4 hours, and inside that 4 hours they're usually getting a 15-minute break shift every 2 hours or so, because it's the only way to keep them that attention level up. And even still, with all those things, there's still things that happen, and security still winds up having a laxed reaction because, you get used to the norm. You just get used to the way things are. I mean, here's a perfect test example. Find someone who owns a Tesla. Find somebody who has owned a Tesla Tesla's been around now for 10 years. Find somebody who's owned a Tesla that whole time. When you find that person who owned that Tesla that whole time, and they used to be a good driver, insist that they drive your car. And look how different they drive now than they drove before they got the Tesla. And it all comes down to the fact that they're used to driving in a different way because they're used to the car driving for them. So everything they do, they are going to react differently than the way you expect them to react. And that's what's going to happen with the self-driving trucks. And like I said, the problem with that comes in that the sensor failures, the CPU failure, the truck just not reacting properly. You get somebody who's driven a self-driving truck for 2 or 3 years and never had an issue, and then all of a sudden they wind up with an issue where maybe the roads are wet, maybe it's not even raining, but the roads are wet from a rain, 15, 20 minutes earlier, and the sensors aren't acting properly, or a sensor fails, it trips when the truck gets ready to react. The truck starts to react and that sensor trips, which is quite common. That's like with our pollution systems in these trucks. That's usually where the pollution sensor will fail. The pollution sensor doesn't fail while the pollution system is idle. The pollution sensor fails when the pollution system engages. And then that's when the faulty pollution sensor fails. It'll be the same thing with the trucks. Any sensor, it's when the sensor is engaged that the sensor fails, which means if the truck is being controlled by sensors and that sensor fails, there's going to be a lag time there on top of the normal lag time in the truck to begin with. And by the time the driver takes over the truck, gets all oriented with what's going on, starts engaging the brakes, 3 to 4 seconds goes by, you've already wiped out a family. You wiped out mom, dad, new baby, maybe grandma and grandpa are in the car. Just wiped out a whole family tree. Because a self-driving truck failed to do its job properly. And because of human nature. Not anything that the operator is doing wrong. Just human nature in itself and human psychology. Just plain and simple facts that cannot be avoided no matter what you do. They cannot be avoided. A whole family tree gets wiped out. That is not safety. Safety is allowing the operator to operate the truck. Now we can argue about whether or not some enhancements to the truck to increase safety, but even they have their issues. Like they had this thing, I had one of these trucks that had the automated braking. And what I noticed was like when I go through Cincinnati, there was a overpass, and the overpass has a corner on it, and the corner had a guardrail in there, and a combination of that trailer and the metal from the shadow from the overpass and the metal from the guardrail, the truck slammed on the brakes. There was absolutely nothing in front of me, and the truck slammed on its brakes and almost closed the pile up behind me. Not me. I didn't touch the brakes. The truck slammed on the brakes by itself because it read that shadow with that metal and it thought there was something in front of me. So the self-braking system has its own issues all on its own. That's not 100% either. It creates issues. I mean, what if people behind me, what if the guy behind, what if the first car behind me was sitting there, and while he was looking down at the phone, my truck slammed on the brakes, and the guy behind him doing the same thing. You wind up getting somebody killed because they smashed into the back of my truck and then got rear-ended by somebody else doing the same thing with their phone runs into the back of their car, all because of a safety system. Not because of me, the system. I didn't touch my brakes, but the truck locked the brakes up because it thought something was in front of me. Needless to say, I got out of that truck. I will not drive a truck with that LiDAR system. And that is the reason why. Because I'm not going to have it on my shoulders knowing that a vehicle I was operating decided to react improperly and took somebody's life. In all honesty, if it happened and somebody got killed, I probably wouldn't be able to drive a truck again. Not because I did anything wrong. It's just that it'd be on my conscience that a truck improperly reacted and there was nothing I could do about it and somebody got murdered. By a safety system. They were murdered by a safety system if that happened. So, all what you're hearing out here, you need to be aware. It's not safe. And then they're talking about these trucks, you hear these politicians saying that, the driver can get more work done because they could be in the back sleeping and let the truck drive down the interstate by itself. I'm not doing that. I'm a solo driver because I can't sleep as it is. I can only sleep when the truck is sitting still. I cannot sleep in a truck while someone else is behind the wheel because I see too many people like this all the time with their phones. And granted, fortunately, the majority of us aren't like that in the trucks, but there are too many truck drivers that are like that. And they're becoming more and more and more common. Because they're used to doing it in their car. So they get behind the wheel of an 80,000-pound bullet. And then they just drive it like their Honda. They think they're driving their Honda down the road playing with their phone. And I refuse to team drive. First of all, I'm not allowed to team drive. Because like I said, I cannot sleep while the truck is moving. So by definition of federal regulations, I am not allowed to team drive. If I knowingly took a job team driving, I am in violation of the agreement I signed when I got my license. I am not allowed to team drive because I know I can't sleep while someone is driving the truck. And since I can't sleep while someone is driving the truck, I will be fatigued while driving on my shift. So, by law, I'm actually not allowed to team drive. Which is a good thing, thank God. That's the one advantage to that, I'm glad I can't sleep while someone's driving. Because that's, I face enough dangers out here as it is. And the idea of not waking up because of somebody else's choices is just ridiculous. And I'm not doing it. And I'm glad that legally I'm not allowed to do it. But you need to be aware of these things. There could be some argument for the self-driving trucks within city limits as long as the driver is in control of the truck while it's on the interstate. And the reason I say that is because the truck will only be doing 30 miles an hour generally in the city. And realistically, from my experience in the cities, the truck will probably on average do 20 miles an hour. So I could see where at low speeds like that with inside the inner city driving, I could see where the self-driving truck might make some sense. But once that truck gets on the interstate, the driver needs to be in control of that truck. Once that truck gets on a road where it's doing more than 45 miles an hour, I would say 30, but at the minimum 45 miles an hour, that truck needs to be operated by the operator, not sensors in a computer. And this is about your safety. Like I said, full disclosure, I drive a truck, so obviously I got some skin in that game. But like I said, at the same time, since you would think they only want experienced people behind the wheel of these self-driving trucks, that would actually, in the end, it should be more money for me, because I'm taking a heightened risk just by getting behind the wheel of that truck. First, I'm putting my personal safety at a heightened risk, but I'm putting my whole future at a heightened risk, because I'm expected to be able to take over for a system that when it fails. So in the end, it should mean more money, actually. So it's not a complete loss. It's just that's not. They're nothing to do with safety. They're really not, and you're being lied to. Anybody who tells you that the self-driving truck is safer, is absolutely lying to you. Whether it's a government bureaucrat, a politician, or generally the ATA here in the trucking industry. It's called the American Trucking Association. They're lying to you. Anybody who tells you that these self-driving trucks are going to be safer, they are absolutely lying to you. They're not going to be safer. Not on the highways. Like I said, there could be an argument for them inside the city limits, where the truck will never be going above 30 miles an hour. Maybe. And even then, there's still issues there. I still see a number of issues there, like where I am now in Cedar Falls. I'm looking at a corner right here, just outside of this receiver that I'm at, and I can already see the issues that the self-driving truck would have getting around that corner, because it's not going to take that corner the way I'm going to, which means it's going to run over that corner, and it's the only way out of here. Which means it will run up on the sidewalk. The trailer will probably drag over the drainage grate, probably wind up causing it to blow out a tire, maybe two tires. I see a number of issues with that corner right there that I'm looking at, just because I know the way the self-driving truck will take that corner is not the way that corner could be taken. It has to take the corner the way I would take that corner, which is a double jug handle. Has to come across the yellow line, start swinging around, and has to go across the yellow line when it comes around the corner. It's the only way to make that corner. And that's the way out of here. It's the only one way in and one way out. And a self-driving truck can't make that corner because the self-driving truck won't cross the yellow lines. So it can't safely navigate that corner properly without doing some kind of damage to something. Number of issues, number of things you are being lied to about, and the public needs to be aware of it.